Julian could lose his life if he is extradited and will lose his life. And there are three scenarios in which that would happen. One is that he could be assassinated. There are already plots that have been elaborated in the United States that no one disputes, neither the CIA or the US administration or even the UK courts. Secondly, there is a real exposure to the death penalty, which is why the UK courts have picked the US up on that. And thirdly, if he's extradited, this is a national security case. They place national security suspects in isolation. That is part of their MO, and the agency that is in charge of determining Julian's conditions in prison would be the CIA, the very agency that was involved in the assassination plots against him.
But Stella Assange, the wife of Julian Assange, now live to drive. Hello to you, Stella.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you here. Tell me, what are your thoughts on what you heard today in court?
Well, it's quite an extraordinary decision. I was frankly astounded. The only way to read this is that the US would lose if this actually was allowed to appeal in its form, and yet the courts have allowed the US to amend their arguments in order to have a better chance to extradite Julian. The case should have just been thrown out.
Right. I mean, one of the thing the judges are asking for is clear proof that America is not contemplating the use of the death penalty. There's no serious suggestion of that, is there?
Well, the courts consider that in its present iteration, there is a very serious risk that there will be a death penalty, that the US, there's nothing stopping the US from imposing a death penalty. They could amend the charges either when Julian arrives in the United States or in relation to sentencing and apply the death penalty. And the Home Secretary has not demanded any assurance that should not happen.
Yeah, I mean, although, far from imposing a death penalty at the end of proceedings in America, assuming there is a trial, there's been reporting, hasn't there, I think it's in the Wall Street Journal, that American authorities are contemplating downgrading the charges to a misdemeanor. Have you had any indication of that?
We have no indication, and Julian's U.S. defense attorney has issued a statement. Everything that we've seen today demonstrates that the U.S. continues its attempt to extradite Julian and has exposed him to a sentence of up to 175 years, and as the courts have acknowledged here, potentially a death sentence. The case should never have been brought, and Julian should not have spent a single day in prison.
Right. It's part of your argument that Julian Assange was and is the target of political persecution. The High Court today did not accept that, did they?
Well, look, we continue to say this is a politically motivated case in every respect. The Trump administration brought this case in 2018, even though it concerns publications from 2010, which Obama did not want to prosecute. And the Trump administration brought it in the context of declaring the press the enemy of the state. It's an unprecedented prosecution that criminalizes publishing true information and uses the Espionage Act for the very first time for publication. So obviously it concerns war crimes and torture and evidence of assassination squads. The content is political. The act of publishing, exposing criminality by the state, is political. The offenses are political offenses under the Espionage Act. And Julian has been also the victim of a murder plot by the Trump administration. And that is, of course, the only reading of that is that it is a political persecution.
And you've levied that accusation, of course, before. Julian Assange's lawyers are going to be arguing that he used leaked material in the manner of a journalist. Do you accept, Stella, that lives were put at risk by what was leaked into WikiLeaks?
Not at all. And the United States, in fact, when under oath, has to admit that it has found no evidence that any person has come to harm. No person has come to harm as a result of these publications. So when they're under oath, they admit that. When they're making press conferences, they make all sorts of outlandish claims, such as the one that you just said. So there's nothing to it. What there is publications evidencing war crimes by the country that's trying to extradite Julian and put him in prison for the rest of his life. Yeah,
as you say, I mean, around the case, American figures have suggested that campaigners in Iraq, Afghanistan, opposition figures and so on, they disappeared, although they do not trace that directly to the WikiLeaks. That is part of your case too, isn't it?
Right. There's no link that the U.S. has established between whatever they call, whatever they say when they are placed under scrutiny, when they're interrogated on their claims. They say actually they have no evidence of any person coming to harm in connection with these publications. So that is the reality.
Tell me, what is the condition of Julian Assange now, the physical and the mental condition?
Well, he is in Belmarsh High Security Prison, which is a notorious prison in the UK, the harshest prison in the UK. He's been there for almost 5 years. On the 11th of April, it will be 5 years. He's not serving a sentence. He's not convicted of any crime. He's basically being kept there indefinitely because the US continues to pursue a politically motivated and insane prosecution against a journalist for publishing true information about that country's criminality.
I mean, Julian Assange's lawyers have argued that if extradited, there's a risk he could take his own life. On what basis do they argue that?
Look, Julian could lose his life if he is extradited and will lose his life. And there are three scenarios in which that would happen. One is that he could be assassinated. There are already plots that have been elaborated in the United States that no one disputes, neither the CIA or the US administration or even the UK courts. Secondly, there is a real exposure to the death penalty, which is why the UK courts have picked the US up on that. And thirdly, if he's extradited, this is a national security case. They place national security suspects in isolation. That is part of their MO, and the agency that is in charge of determining Julian's conditions in prison would be the CIA, the very agency that was involved in the assassination plots against him.
But the suggestion that Julian Assange could take his own life, on what is that based?
That he would be driven to commit suicide because of the isolated conditions that he would be placed under, in combination with his history, his psychiatric history, which was examined both by the prosecution experts and the defense experts. They converged on the fact that there's a high risk that he will be exposed to, driven to take his own life if he is placed in isolation, and also because he is diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. Right, all these factors.
Right. Now, what about your comments on the way the courts have conducted this process? I mean, do you recognise that the British judicial system is an independent process? It is independent from politics, because you suggest there's, I don't know, maybe in some way collusion going on here.
You're asking me to make a blanket statement that there is no such thing as a political case or a political pressure on the judicial system. I don't think anyone involved in the judicial system would accept that.
No,
of course.
To be fair, Stella, I'm not asking you to prove that. It's your assertion that is the case. I just wonder how you answer the argument that the British judicial system is independent politically.
It's undeniable that this is a politically motivated case, that the content is political, that the context is political. We have a publisher who has been the victim of a murder plot in the United Kingdom. We have evidence of war crimes, torture, and assassination squads, which is what he revealed, and he is being punished. He is being imprisoned because he published the truth about it.
Right, Stella Assange, thank you for giving us your perspective on this story, which of course we will be following. Stella Assange there.